Keep or trade? What should their respective teams do with Trey Lance, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, J.K. Dobbins? To get into all that and much more coming up next here on this Friday edition of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On NFL. We're your daily NFL podcast here. I'm your host, one of them at least, Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens. Here with me is your boy Q, the host over at Locked On Raiders. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us, making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. We're free and available all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code Locked On to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. And Q, I'm excited that last week of preseason coming up here. We're finally feeling like there's some regular season football coming up. And the preseason's, it's fun when it first starts, but after a little while, and I remember when it was 4, it felt like a really long drag out.
Right.
Only 3 games now, and we're finally getting into that regular season mode, at least soon here.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Once they get into 2 weeks of the preseason, it's like, okay, I'm ready to get this over, right? So just get on to the regular season, and that's right around the corner, man. And, the 53-man roster has to be trimmed down by Tuesday, so that's going to be fun to see how these teams shape up. But it's almost here, man. We've been working, trying to get to the starting point of the regular season, and it's almost here. So it's really exciting and plenty of storylines leading up to it for sure.
Yeah, there were a couple of, it was a big trade day on Thursday. We saw Isaiah Simmons get moved out from Arizona. The Cardinals were wheeling and dealing on Thursday with Josh Jones. They bring in Josh Dobbs. The Simmons move for a lot of people. They liked it for the Giants. I think the Cardinals moved him around too much early in his career. The Giants take a flyer on him. Did you like that move for him?
I kind of liked it because we don't know who Isaiah Simmons is. It's similar to when the Cardinals had Hassan Reddick, right? They had Hassan Reddick, and it seemed like he never really fit. And maybe that's just a Cardinals thing, right? They have a few guys there that you don't really know how they fit in. And I remember when Isaiah Simmons was coming out, man, I think everyone who was anyone wanted him because he could do so many different things. But the one thing that I was always cautioned was, he could do a lot of things, but what is he a master of, right? And so that was always the big question. And so clearly, the Cardinals never found what he was the master of. Now the Giants have a very athletic dude. Maybe he could become a master there in New York. I know Locked On Giants host Patricia Traynor was pretty excited about that trade. Thought that was a good addition for the Giants defense. So I'm interested from a distance to see what that looks like. But we know Isaiah Simmons is young, and we know he's very talented and very athletic. So if they can find what fits for him, how he fits in that defense, it could be really good for Wink Martindale and company.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals with him and Zaven Collins is someone too who they've tried to move around a lot. They just haven't been able to find where they fit in. And there have been more of those players. I mean, there are a lot of those guys that can play like literally everywhere on a defense, and it's about finding the right place for them. But I think for some of these teams, even the Ravens, I think with Brandon Stevens, who's gone from corner to safety, you just can't settle in on a position and kind of go into an offseason knowing where you're going to be. And I think that's kind of difficult. So hopefully the Giants can figure out. But with this wheeling and dealing, Q, there are some players that have been either on the trade block or there have been trade conversations around that we want to get into in terms of should their respective teams keep them or trade them and what would be best for the team and the player. I think Trey Lance is where we have to start here. Obviously, the not rumors is now confirmed that Sam Darnold is that backup quarterback there in San Francisco. Brock Purdy, the starter. It's been such a weird career for Trey Lance. Obviously, he's only played in 8 games, has pretty rotten injury luck, hasn't gotten a real shot there in San Francisco, just hasn't been on the field. And now the conversations have started about, well, having him as the third quarterback doesn't really make a lot of sense for either the 49ers or Lance at this point. So it's about, should they keep him or should they move on? I'm curious to hear where you are on it, and then I'll give my answer for this one. Should the 49ers keep him or trade him?
You know, the funny thing is the 49ers probably with their quarterback history, their quarterback luck of getting injured, they probably should keep him, right? I mean, just because they need as many bodies as possible at that quarterback position. They just have never been able to keep a healthy guy. But for Trey Lance, it would be best if he was to get moved, right? I mean, if I'm Trey Lance, I'm probably walking into John Lynch's office is like, look, okay, I get it. I'm the third string quarterback. Things haven't worked out here. fine. But I need to go somewhere where I can actually get some kind of development. I can have someone actually work with me, because right now, you know how it is when the season starts. You think they're going to be worried about developing the third string quarterback? Like, he's going to be scout team. He's going to be a guy that may get a couple reps here and there. He's not going to get developed. So you have Brock Purdy, you have Sam Darnold, and then all of a sudden you have Trey Lance. So, I mean, if I'm Trey, I'm saying, hey, man, move me anywhere. Look for a team that needs a quarterback, and boom. I mean, even if he's got to be, kind of slid in as the second string quarterback, at least he's going to get some kind of attention in some camp, some team that has a focus in, let's see how we can develop this guy. Because right now, San Francisco, as a third string quarterback, there's going to be no development. I know they gave up a lot of draft capital to go get him, but they've got no return on investment. They're not going to get much return on investment as far as the trade goes, but sometimes you just got to cut your losses. And if I'm Trey Lance, I'm telling him, hey, man, cut your losses and move me.
Yeah, if you're the 49ers, you have to be kind of sick about how much you gave up for him and what's happened with that situation. I'm with you exactly in terms of, if I'm the 49ers, I would probably say, yeah, let's keep him. Let's see if it can pan out, kind of a last gasp effort. But it makes no sense for Trey Lance to be there for his development, for his NFL career. I know, Minnesota's been a team that a lot of people think makes sense because their backup quarterback situation is not super great. But in San Francisco, the whole conversation has been, well, they have all these pieces. They traded for McCaffrey. They have Debo and Brandon Ayuk, and the defense is great, and George Kittle's there. But it's always been the question about the quarterback. With Jimmy G there, could he be the guy to lead them? Obviously, he's now in Vegas with the Raiders. Purdy, he did a great job, but is he a long-term answer? The 49ers clearly felt like they gave up their future for a guy that could step in and be their starter. So if I'm San Francisco, is a third-string quarterback, like, for Trey Lance to be a third-string quarterback of any team, you have depth. I mean, Sam Darnold, obviously his career hasn't gone as planned since being a high draft pick in New York 2018. But I don't know, just in playing in only 8 games after giving up 3 picks, 3 firsts and a third for him. Yeah. For San Fran, I don't know. It feels like for me, I would just be sick with how it's gone. And I feel bad for Lance too, because the career, obviously, he's had rotten injury luck, and that it plays a part. I feel bad for him.
Right, exactly. The thing about it also is, now that they have the new emergency quarterback rule based off the game that we saw, right, the Eagles and the 49ers in the playoffs, some could say, well, he could still end up being that emergency quarterback. He could be the guy that dresses out, and worst case scenario, they put him in if need be. But still, you're not getting that kind of development. And at some point, right, if I'm Trey Lance, I'm like, okay, it has not worked out here. It's clearly not going to work out here. You have other plans. And look, I mean, he's already, multiple years into his career, so they're going to have to make contract decisions pretty soon, right? And I wouldn't be comfortable giving him a contract when, what have I seen? They've already gave him a boatload of money. Like, I think he's gotten paid like $27 million already for a whole lot of nothing. So think about all the money that he's received. Think about all the draft capital that they gave up. They've got nothing back in return. So, again, I think that the fact that John Lynch was able to find Brock Purdy late in the draft last season, the fact that they were able to pull off the trade for Christian McCaffrey, the fact that they have a really good defense despite losing defensive coordinator each and every year, right? They still field that really good defense. They're still a really good team. I think John Lynch gets the benefit of the doubt. Nobody ever really questions the moves that he makes, but I mean, this was a big miss. I mean, there's no other way to sum it up. This was a big miss for the 49ers and John Lynch. And at some point, you just got to say, okay, look, we're going to have to chalk that up to a loss. And we're going to, it's almost like a garage sale. You put it out there and someone's going to, finagle down to something. And you just say, you know what, take it. It's not worth taking it back in the house. Go ahead. Just go ahead and take it and we'll move on. And I think that's eventually what San Francisco's going to have to do. But I can see Kyle Shanahan and company saying, yeah, well, we might need an extra body, so let's just go ahead and hold on to him anyway, which I don't think is fair to Trey Lance, and I'm sure Trey Lance is not a fan of that either.
No, and to your point, I just don't know what you get for him at this point. Like, is it a 4th? Is it a conditional pick? I mean,
not much.
With the conditional pick, I mean, he's not going to a place where he's going to be the starter right away, most likely, unless some crazy, and we've seen crazy injuries happen in preseason, but I would doubt many, if any, starters will play in the final preseason game for a lot of these teams, unless it might be a series or 2. So for Trey Lance, a conditional pick, well, he's not going to hit any conditions because he's going to be a backup most likely. So it's a very, I'd say, a rotten situation for Trey Lance, because I would assume the 49ers probably keep him because they're going to look at the offers they're getting and they're going to say this is just not worth it based off of what we gave up and what the future was. I mean, they were building their team. They were going to build their team around him. They were trying to figure out how they could utilize him. And then Brock Purdy comes in, and you mentioned the quarterback game against Philadelphia, the third quarterback rule. I know the 49ers obviously would have benefited from that after they had Purdy and Josh Johnson go down. So I don't know what's next for Trey Lance. I would assume the 49ers keep him, but as we talked about, I think it's fair to Trey Lance if the 49ers are going to move him to a place where he can at least get backup quarterback run at the very least, because third quarterback for Trey Lance doesn't seem right to me. I don't think it does overall. But coming up here in the second part of Locked On NFL, we'll be diving into Jonathan Taylor's relationship with the Colts. It's been an ongoing conversation. Should the Colts keep or trade Taylor? So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to dive into on Locked On NFL here.
And we'll get right into it after tell you about Harry's. And no matter why you shave, Harry's has you covered for the best shave of your life at a price that you're going to love. From their legendary high-quality razors to skin products like exfoliating face wash and hydrating lotion, Harry's is going to give you a premium shave without the premium price tag. Get better quality and a better price than other razors when you get Harry's delivered right to your door. How about the starter set? It's a $13 value for only $3. That's at harrys.com/NFL. It includes a 5-blade German-engineered razor, weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover. Scheduled delivery for refills as low as $2. Half what you pay for other blades. Harry's makes the skincare products that will give you the best shave ever. And I'm talking creams, washes, lotions. It'll give your skin healthy and hydrated. It's going to do some really good things for you. Blades made in their own factory in Germany that stay sharp. Guys who've tried it say their 8th shave is as sharp as their first. What you need to do right now, get your best shave ever this summer. And I know summer's wrapping up, but get your best shave ever. Harry's razor and skincare products get a $13 starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. That's harrys.com/NFL for a $3 starter set.
We're back here, Locked On NFL, our second part of the show, Friday edition. Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens, here with your boy Q, the host of Locked On Raiders. We talked about Trey Lance and whether it's fair to Trey Lance to keep him or trade him. What should the 49ers do? But Q, this Jonathan Taylor situation has honestly it's been very public, I would say, with Jim Irsay coming out there, Jonathan Taylor's agent, and the whole running back position in general. Obviously, you know, with Josh Jacobs, we'll get to him in the final part of the show, even J.K. Dobbins, who we'll get to also. Every running back, it seems like, is unhappy with the state of that. And honestly, rightfully so. And Jonathan Taylor, I think, is at the forefront with Saquon, with Josh Jacobs in that, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler being outspoken about it too. But with the way this has gone for Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, obviously it's gotten very ugly very quickly. For Taylor, he's a player that is going to be demanding a big deal coming up here. This is a contract year for him, as is for a lot of these running backs. But the market every year, and this is what I always say, and I know we've had this conversation about, with the running back position, it feels like every year the age that teams are willing to say, yeah, this guy can still play goes down. Like, I think it was 30 years old back like in 2019 when the Ravens signed Mark Ingram was my thing, where he was 30 at that time or right around it. And everybody thought, okay, it's going to be 1 year with the Ravens. And then obviously he's past the age. But the age seems like, oh, well, now 29 is too old, 28, 27. We see guys like Dalvin Cook and Zeke Elliott out on the market for weeks, months at a time. But for a guy like Taylor, who had the breakout, has shown he's one of the best running backs in the NFL, it comes down to if you're trading him, if you're the Colts, what are teams going to give up? The asking price is huge. Yeah. But it just feels like, to me, it's gotten so ugly where I don't know how it can be repaired fully to the point where, everybody's happy in the locker room and everything's fine and dandy with both sides.
Right. Well, the thing is, and I say it all the time, that money is undefeated. So money will make everybody happy, right? I mean, if you go ahead and throw a boatload of money at them, the relationship all of a sudden is healed, right? But with that being said, this has been very public. This has been very ugly. Jim Irsay, I think he drew his line in the sand early in this situation, and it was a misstep, right? And if you say Jim Irsay made a misstep, would anybody be shocked? No, because that's kind of what he does. So, he just stirs some stuff up, and I thought he kind of barked up the wrong tree when he was talking about the CBA and position players, starting to talk about not being paid right. And I'm thinking, you're talking about your own guy. And so here we are. Taylor requests a trade. They say, no, we're not trading them. And then they give him permission. They give him till Tuesday, which is the day that the rosters have to be trimmed down to 53. Also is the same day they got to make a decision if they're going to put him on the PUP list or not. So, it's kind of like a double whammy. I've understand that there's been trade offers already from other teams out there. I'm expecting the Miami Dolphins to be a team that's very interested in them. They're actually a team that called the Raiders and asked about Josh Jacobs. And as you mentioned, we'll talk about him and J.K. Dobbins and others in segment number 3. But yeah, I mean, I think Miami's interested, but at what price, right? I mean, you're talking about a guy who missed 6 games last year. You're talking about a guy who's injured right now, right? I mean, so, and I don't know how injured he is. I just know that he's not participating in camp right now. And the word on the street is the ankle injury. And before it was a back injury. And so it's just, this situation has become ugly. Like the situation in San Francisco with Trey Lance is unfortunate, but this is ugly. It's just not the way that it should go. I don't know who's going to go and pony up what the Colts actually want. I mean, again, they said that they want a first-round pick or something equivalent to that, so maybe a second and a player. That's a lot for a position that's not being valued like it should be, right? And that's been the whole complaint. So it's almost like a full circle now. Okay, you're not valuable enough to give you a big contract extension, but you're valuable enough to get a first-round pick. Like, where does that make sense? Right? I mean, how are you going to – I mean, you're talking out both sides of your mouth. You're not valuable enough as a player for us to give you a big contract extension, but you are valuable enough as a player for us to get a first-round pick for you. Like, that doesn't really make sense. So it feels to me, and I could be wrong, there could be a team that says, you know what, hell, we're one Jonathan Taylor away from winning the Super Bowl, and they just go ahead and do it. And kind of similar to the Rams, just go ahead and give up the picks and get the player because the player is more valuable right now. I don't see how this actually shakes out. I don't see how this plays out. I feel like Jonathan Taylor is going to end up with the Colts in this season. He's not going to be happy. He's not going to get a contract extension. And if he plays, they'll have to play on that. He's making about $4 million this year. And then let the chips fall where they may after the season. That's what my gut feeling tells me. Maybe some team will jump up and surprise me, but that's how I feel right now.
Yeah, I don't see how, if the extension happens, it happens. I just don't see how the Colts give him that after obviously Jim Irsay, you mentioned, has made it pretty clear what his stance is. But the thing about a team trading for him is that not only do you have to give up whatever the Colts are, well, you don't have to give it up. There's going to be a negotiation, but if it's a high pick, on top of that, if you give up that pick, you're going to want to sign him to an extension in most cases. And that extension is going to be, I know Taylor's asking for what the rumors are $15+ million per season, which in this running back market is unfortunate, but it's pretty unrealistic based off of what's been going on. So it's almost kind of like the situation with Lamar, not exactly, but with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, the whole thing was if you pay for a guy like Lamar was worth every penny, don't get me wrong. But if that was a situation, one, you got to give up the multiple firsts for him, and you have to sign him to the big extension. So for a team, there were already very little. There were a few teams that could have done it, but there weren't a lot because you got to kind of shape the entire offense around a guy like that. Now, for running backs, it's a little different. You don't have to shape the entire offense around him, but giving up the high draft capital, plus you got to sign him to an extension. Only a handful of teams can realistically even do that in the first place. So for Lamar, it was never really realistic he was going to go anywhere. For Taylor, obviously, he's not getting $260+ million, but it's the same concept where in a position where I think it's been so like the running back position is at an all-time low right now. The value is so devalued because teams feel like they can just go out there, find a guy in the 4th round every single season and not have to sign a guy to a big extension because of the position. Again, the age has just gone down and down and down with how far teams want to go with that. So I think for Taylor and the Colts, for both sides, it'd be best if they were just to move on. I just don't see how it's realistic because with a 1st-round pick for the Colts asking price, that's not realistic. For Taylor's asking price, that's not realistic. It just feels like there's a lot of unrealistic scenarios, and all those combining into one makes me feel like they're probably just going to ride it out this season. I don't know if that means Taylor's on the field in week 1, but it feels like at least to start the season, Taylor's going to be there unless something crazy happens and asking prices come down and the team feels comfortable taking that risk with him.
I'm glad you brought up Lamar Jackson because I similarly feel like that this is a situation that is kind of what Lamar's situation was when the Ravens didn't put the exclusive franchise tag on him. So basically they allowed him to go test the market and see what his worth was. And I say that in air quotes, see what his value is. And so that's to me what the Colts are doing. Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan. Go find a trade partner. Go ahead and see what your value is on the open market. Let's get a reality check for you. I feel like that's almost what they're doing. And then coming back and saying, yeah, we're not going to take that trade. Yeah, we're not going to take that trade. And oh, by the way, we're not going to give you that $15 million or whatever you think that you're worth because that's just not what the market is. Obviously, Lamar and Jonathan Taylor are two different people, but it all worked out for the Ravens. Lamar came back. There was no team that was willing to offer the money that was reported that Lamar wanted, even though we never heard from him that that's what he wanted. But it ends up working out for Baltimore really well. He's got his money. He's got a new offensive coordinator, as you know, and ready to rock and roll into this season. So maybe that's a situation that happens with Jonathan Taylor. But the only problem is I feel like that the relationship is really damaged right now. So even if he does end up back in Indy this year and playing, it just seems like the inevitable is that he'll be out of there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it feels like this is probably his last year there. Like, if
Yeah.
I was Taylor, I wouldn't want to resign there because the owners
Right.
made it very clear what his stance is. And I know the thing that's different between Lamar's situation, well, there are multiple, but between Lamar and Jonathan Taylor is that I think Lamar truly did want to be there. And he just wanted to go. The whole thing with that is he felt like he wanted to be paid what he was deserved. And,
Right.
deservedly so. He deserved to be paid what he was paid. But he wanted to come back to Baltimore. He wanted it to work out there. I don't think Jonathan Taylor necessarily wants it to work out in Indianapolis.
Yep.
I think that Jim Irsay made it very clear. I think Jonathan Taylor feels disrespected by what he said, and I would too personally if the person who I play for essentially
Right.
didn't value me. I would say, hey, I want to go somewhere where I am valued, where a team wants to have me on the field and wants to pay me what I'm worth. So I think that Taylor, unfortunately for him, will still be in Indianapolis. I just don't think those unrealistic scenarios will all align perfectly. But if I'm Jonathan Taylor, I'm not re-signing there. But then you get into the conversation about franchise tags and what do you do with the franchise tag? And that's a whole other can of worms. And I know we'll get into franchise tag in the final part of the show. Josh Jacobs obviously knows something about that. We'll also talk about J.K. Dobbins and what the futures are for some of those guys and so much more coming up next here on Locked On NFL. But first, this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, and August is here, and you know what that means. It's the official start of fantasy football drafting month, so get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy, which is a really intriguing twist on fantasy. All you do is it's one live snake draft. There's no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every single week, and you can try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament, the largest fantasy football contest of all time, is back and even bigger than ever with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner last year. The winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. You got to get on it with Underdog and visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them on the App Store and sign up with promo code Locked On to get your first deposit doubled up to $100 as Underdog Fantasy promo code Locked On. We're back here rounding out Locked On NFL here on Friday. Kevin Oestreicher still here with your boy Q. And Q, there are a couple other running back situations that are really intriguing to get into. I think Josh Jacobs, let's start there with Las Vegas. The two sides unable to agree on a long-term deal. He gets franchise tagged. What's kind of the latest on Jonathan Taylor right now? Because I know there have been some I don't know what to call them, rumblings about a potential trade with him. Do you think that's realistic, or do you think it's almost like Jonathan Taylor where the two sides will just stick together this season and figure it out next offseason?
Yeah, I don't think that it's realistic. I know that the Dolphins did call the Raiders in their front office to see what it would take to get Josh Jacobs. And remember, he hasn't signed the deal yet. So in order for anything to happen, he would have to sign that deal, and then they can negotiate a trade. I believe that the Raiders are very invested in him being a Raider this year. And I think they really did want to get a long-term deal done. From everything that I understood is that really the agent, Josh's people, it just kind of pushed back on some of the language and some of the way that the money was structured. And so they weren't big fans of that. So the Raiders are just kind of being patient, but met with GM Dave Ziegler and the assistant GM Champ Kelly on Thursday. And from what it sounded like, even though they're very short and they're not going to play their hands, they're not going to put their hands out to the media, but what it sounded like is that they're just going to be patient and they're going to wait Josh Jacobs out. And look, $10 million, I'd be surprised if he passes that up at all. The thing about it is, Kevin, that I guess for Raider fans is upsetting is now that you're at the point of the training camp and preseason. Well, training camp's over, but the preseason, and you're getting prepared for week 1 of the regular season. Now, I don't know if even if he showed up today, if he'd be available for week 1, right? I mean, because he's got to get some kind of acclimation to getting hit and just getting a little bit of run with his legs and getting in camp and, like I said, getting hit and just getting back into the mix. And I don't know if he'd be available. And if he was available for week 1, maybe it's a handful of snaps. I don't think it'd be the full workload. So right now it feels like every day that goes by that he is not showing up kind of slows down his progress into the regular season. So that's going to hurt the Raiders as well. And who knows? I mean, those kind of situations sometimes play out where guys get injured and, it's an unfortunate situation, and this is the business side of the NFL. But when it comes to trading him, I just don't think that that's going to happen. Now, if he doesn't show up for a couple weeks into the regular season, maybe they just pull the tag and say, you know what, the hell with it. whatever, just go ahead and do whatever because you're not here anyway. I mean, I could see that maybe being the very worst case scenario. I just think that he's a lot smarter than that. He's not going to pass up $10 million. So I don't think he's on the trade block, but I do know that Miami for sure has called to ask about him, and there may be other teams that have called as well, but it doesn't sound like that he's going to get traded anytime soon.
It seems like the Dolphins are in on everybody. they're trying to make some big splash.
Yeah.
They lost Jalen Ramsey, so we'll see what they want to do. But, they were interested in Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. So it seems like they want to make some sort of move at the running back position. And if they can get their hands on a running back, I like the Dolphins' chances this year, at least of being a dark horse type of contender. But for Jacobs and the Raiders, it seems like it's not like Taylor and the Colts where it's not ugly. Like, I don't think it's an ugly situation where I think the whole thing is more of Jacobs being frustrated. One, that he didn't get the deal, but two, the frustration at the running back position being as devalued as it is. I don't think it's like Taylor where clearly, there's something very, very wrong with those two sides. With Jacobs and the Raiders, it feels like that could be something where if the deal works out, whether it's before the season, in season, next off season, everything would be fine and they could just move on and have it. And Jacobs deserves, I know we've talked about it, Q, where he's earned whatever deal he gets. He's grinded to get to the point of where he's been and had the breakout year in 2022. So he's somebody I'm personally rooting for. But one guy I'm rooting for too, Q, is J.K. Dobbins, because he's a guy that has been through so much injury-wise. It's been a frustrating couple of years for him. And much like Josh Jacobs in multiple situations, there are questions about the future for him in Baltimore. Now, Dobbins reported to camp. Well, he's been at camp, but he ended the presumed hold in this past week. And kind of like what you were saying about Jacobs in week one, I think Dobbins figured or kind of realized that, I got to be back by a certain point to ramp up and get ready, or else I might not get a full workload. And for me, this is an important year for Dobbins in a contract year. One, to prove his health status. Suffered the terrible knee injury in 2021, and shouldn't have been playing anyway. It was a bad decision by the Ravens to play their guys, and that was one series. And obviously, anything can happen in the NFL. Injuries happen, and J.K. goes down with, it wasn't just a torn ACL. He revealed it was about 4 or 5 ligaments in that knee that ended up getting busted up. So he had to recover from that. Came back at about week 3-4 of 2022. Then had to go back under the knife mid-season to get something cleaned up in there. So it's been a very frustrating couple of years for J.K. Now, for him, it feels like he wanted the long-term security now. And for me, my thing with the situation is that I don't think his value is at an all-time high right now. I think when people look at JK, it's, he's been injured the past 2 seasons. The potential's there, but can he stay healthy? If JK has the year I think he's going to have, which I think is going to be good, I think his value skyrockets. And how much is skyrocketing in today's NFL running back market? I don't think it's necessarily a ton. But if he were to sign a long-term deal right now today, I don't think it's nearly as much as what he could get, let's say, in March of next offseason. But then the questions come about the tag and what he wants to do. He said multiple times over the course of his press conference on Wednesday, I think it was, Wednesday, that he wanted to be in Baltimore. He's a very loyal guy, one team only. And again, how much of that is player speak? How much of it is true? We don't really know, because you're not going to go up there and say, oh, yeah, get me out of it. Well, some players do it, but most players don't go, get me out of here. I don't like where I am. I think that'd be that wouldn't be a great way to take it for most guys, but I don't know what the future holds for JK, but I think he was being genuine. And the thing with JK though, Q, is that the Ravens don't pay running backs historically. They don't do it. I mean, they gave Gus Edwards a 3-year, $10 million deal. I think it was. I think JK is going to get a little more than that. And so with the Lamar extension signed, with them having to re-sign Odell, or else it hits in the void of your money, I just don't know. I mean, you can't keep everybody, and I don't know if JK is going to be on their radar. I hope he is, but I just don't know.
I think that if he has the big season like you're anticipating, and man, I was a big J.K. Dobbins fan coming out of Ohio State, man. I thought he was going to be the dude. Hated when he tore his knee up, like you mentioned. Sometimes it's just, it's bad luck, wrong place, wrong time, wrong play, whatever the case may be. But man, that dude is a super talented running back. So if he does have that big monster season, I can easily see Baltimore just tagging him, right? I mean, because that's just kind of what happens with running backs, which, I mean, look what Dallas did with Tony Pollard. He was a 4th round pick. They tagged him, and Tony Pollard's like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll sign that, right? Because he had never got money like that before. I mean, that was $10 million guaranteed for 1 year. Oh, by the way, coming off an injury. So it might actually make a lot of sense, since JK has had that injury history. If he could play this season, be injury-free, put in a monster year, and Baltimore does tag him, which, like I said, I expect that they probably would do that instead of just committing the long term because of the injury history. it might make sense for him to play one more year on a franchise tag and make, it's going to be more than $10.1 million for a fully guaranteed year. Maybe make him $12 million fully guaranteed. And then if you do it 2 years in a row, and again, it stinks because you're a running back, then you have a lot of wear and tear on your tires, and obviously you can still use the injury history against him. But I feel like that's a better position for him to be in than just kind of hoping that a team gives him a long-term deal. Because like you mentioned, Baltimore just doesn't pay running back. So it's a tough situation. When did Baltimore get him? Was it the 3rd or 4th round?
It was second. He was
Okay,
right in the Taylor range, right in that Jonathan Taylor range, actually.
Okay, second round. So at least he's seen some decent money, but he still hasn't seen that fully guaranteed money like that, like a franchise tag would be if they were to hit him with that. Obviously, he's got to go put in the work this year. But man, you want to talk about rooting for a guy? That's a guy I root for as well. I mean, he's just as you know, a genuine dude and a hell of a worker. And unfortunately, he's just been hit with the injury bug, over the past few years. And so if he can click with that Baltimore offense that, by the way, I'm very excited about just to see what it looks like when the season gets started, I think they could be in for a hell of a year in a division that's going to be one of the toughest in football, if not the toughest.
Yeah, the AFC North is going to be, I think you could see all 4 of those teams making the playoffs in some way, shape, or form. And I tell you, Q, the AFC.
Don't say that. That's the kiss of death. Don't say that. I was saying that about the AFC West last year. Don't bring that up yourself.
I talked up the AFC West all off season, literally all off season last year. I said every team is going to be a 10-win team, and yeah. So maybe I jinxed it. I take it back. I take it back.
Take it
back. Be the worst division in football. So, I mean, JK is a guy that I think JK is a little freaked out by not having long-term security because of the injury situation. I think a franchise tag would be stressful for him, but I think it might be the best option. So I agree with what you're saying, where for Dobbins, I don't think a trade happens. I don't think there's any shot, honestly, a trade happens. They're just going to go into the offseason and see what they have there. But I think JK would like long-term security. I don't know if that means he'll sacrifice what $10 million guaranteed would be, but I don't know what his year is going to look like. If he gets injured again, a lot of the conversation is going to be, because I think it's unfair to slap injury-prone labels on guys who have been out for 3 years in a row of having serious injuries. Then you can have that conversation. 2 years, I just think is super unlucky. I think unlucky is 2 years, and then we can have a conversation in 3 years, and then 4 years, I think kind of fair to say, yeah, sure. So JK's at 1.5, I would say, because he was able to come back from the injury. So I don't know what happens there, but it's going to be interesting. Maybe some of these guys are trade deadline, for a guy like Lance, a guy like Taylor. Jacobs and Dobbins, I feel like are a little more unrealistic.
Could be, though, like you said, trade deadline. I mean, you never know what some teams may be offering and what position they feel like that they're in. And hey, maybe they're one J.K. Dobbins away, one Josh Jacobs away, one Jonathan Taylor away. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the situation. You already see what Arizona's doing. They're already waving the white flag, selling off everybody. So, who knows what happens at the trade deadline. But for now, I think that we pretty much nailed it with Trey Lance and Jonathan Taylor, and then Jacobs and J.K. Dobbins are good for the team, at least for now.
Yeah, I don't know what happens, but the trade deadline I feel like was really dull for a lot of years, and then it's picked back up over these past couple of seasons with big moves happening. So a team maybe gets desperate, a team maybe wasn't expecting to contend as much as they have, and then they go out there and make a move, and maybe they'll give up a little more. Maybe the Colts, the 49ers, maybe the Raiders or the Ravens will be looking to move some pieces. But I think that's all we have, Q. I appreciate you hopping on with me as we embarked on this keeper trade journey, and I'm excited for the regular season. We've hit almost all the milestones here. Preseason is almost checked off, and I'm ready for regular season football.
Me too. Bring on the regular season. This preseason stuff is for the birds. I'm good. I'm over it. Looking forward to the 53-man roster when teams trim that down. That'll be on Tuesday, so there'll be plenty to talk about as we ramp up and head into the regular season for 2023. Man, excited about it. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all we have for you here today on Locked On NFL. Thank you so much for tuning in. For your boy Q, I'm Kevin Oestreicher. When we get back here on Monday, we'll be diving into more NFL content on our Monday episode, so be sure to stay tuned for that. We'll see you right back here on Monday on Locked On NFL.